ask yourself, who is God? I mean, who is God, and is God personal? And if he is personal, how do we relate to him? What's a good name for God? How do I refer to God in general, and how do I refer to God in a very personal type of way? If we go all the way back to the beginning of the Bible, Moses is being told by God to go back. You remember he had left Egypt and had fled, and now God is telling Moses, hey, I want you to go back, and you're going to speak to my people, and you're going to lead them out from Pharaoh's army. You're going to lead them out of Egypt. And it is in that moment where Moses is like, okay, when I go there, who do I tell them? Who do I tell them that has sent me? Who do I say is in charge of this whole Exodus? They're not going to like me initially, so who am I going to say sent me? Who gives me this authority? Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. God replied to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. This word I am is all inclusive. It's this word where we get the word Yahweh, and in the sense of how the Hebrew has it there. You can see it on the screen. And then when they begin to transliterate it, as they write it in the Old Testament, when we read it, they just have the major capital letters there, YH, WH, Yahweh. And this means the self-existent, non-contingent, always present one. So when you were singing that song, Yahweh, this is the this is the self-existent, non-contingent God. He says, listen, when you go there, you tell them I am. I have always been. I don't have a beginning. I don't have an end. I'm not relying on anything. I'm all-powerful. I'm all-knowing. I'm always faithful. And as you're going to see, I am very personal. So you tell them, I am sent you. You tell them, Yahweh sent you. As we will learn over the next couple of weeks, there's different names for God referred to in the Old Testament. And so we're going to move into that and learn a very personal name today. As we get ready to dive into Genesis chapter 16, I want to make sure we always remember when you're reading through these Old Testament stories, many times the stories are descriptive and not prescriptive, meaning it's not telling you what you should do. You see a man of God or a woman of God doing this. It just tells the story. And so sometimes it is just descriptive of telling. This is one of those stories where it talks about a man of God having multiple wives. A lot of times people say, well, that's just the way it was in the Old Testament. God allowed it and God wanted it. You should know that even though it seems like everybody in the Old Testament had polygamists and was a polygamist with many wives, there's only 5 mentioned in the Bible of leaders who had multiple wives, and it never ends well. So it's not like God said, go do this. It was telling of the story. And as you see in this story, it never ends the way God would prefer it to end in the story. But as you're going to see, God is always active. God is always known and powerful in the story. And so I'm going to read to you the story from Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 and following. Again, Abram has been told he's going to be the father of all nations. His kids are going to be like the stars. And now he's getting older and older and older, and he still has not had a kid by his wife Sarai. So we pick up this story there. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not borne him a child, but she had an Egyptian slave woman whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, see now, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Please have relations with my slave woman. Perhaps I will obtain children through her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. Now, we always have to remember that names are very important in the Old Testament. We're reading the story here early. It's Abram, which means exalted father. God's going to change his name to Abraham, which means exalted father of many. Sarai just means princess. Sarah, which her name will be changed to, is princess of many. So in this story, God hasn't changed their name yet. He's given them the promise Abraham's going to be the father of many nations. It's Father Abraham as we have come to know him. He's still here, Abram and Sarai, and they're not able to have children. They're getting older and older. And so Sarai's like, I'm past childbearing age. If we're going to believe what God said, maybe we need to help God out a little bit in what he said he was going to do. Never a good idea. Verse 3. And so after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar, the Egyptian, her slave woman, and gave her to her husband Abram as his wife. Then he had relations with Hagar, and she conceived. And when Hagar became aware that she had conceived, her mistress was insignificant in her sight. Would you remember that phrase? Hagar now is pregnant. She's now pregnant to the mighty Abram's child. She now has a place. She was just a know-nothing slave in the home, and now she has a child. And now with this child, she now looks at Sarai with contempt. She says, you know what? You're not as good as I am. I am now better than you. And her mistress was insignificant in her sight. Verse 5. So Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done to me be upon you. I put my slave woman into your arms, but when she saw that she had conceived, I was insignificant in her sight. May the Lord judge between you and me. And again, this is a phrase where people would use it back then to say, hey, things have not gone well between us. We'll let the Lord figure it out. And so here's Sarai. It was her idea to go and have Hagar sleep with her husband to get a child. Now that Hagar's pregnant, it's not going well. She now sees what's happening. She doesn't like what's happening. It was her idea. She's blaming Abram, and really it's his idea too because he's the one who allowed it. The whole thing is not turning out very well. May the Lord judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, look, your slave woman is in your power. Do to her what is good in your sight. And there's that phrase again, in your sight. So Sarai treated her harshly, and she fled from her presence. I mean, you begin to read this story, and it's like one of those now Netflix original stories developing here. I mean, it's just crazy, the story that's going on here. God says, you're going to have children. You're going to be the father of many nations. It's not happening on their timing, so then we're going to go get Hagar. We're going to sleep with her. That'll be a good idea. We're going to bring her into it, and then she's going to have a child. She becomes pregnant. It's not going well with theirs. They don't like each other. She now sees herself as more than just a slave. I mean, this is a crazy story developing. You see, we all have a story. We've all come in here today with a story. I want you to be thinking about your story. Some of you are like, you think this is a wild family. You should have been in my home. But we all have a story. And so she fled from her presence. Sarai mistreated her. And so she flees and leaves. Verse 7, now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness. That's Hagar. By the spring on the way to Shur. He said, Hagar, Sarai's slave woman, from where have you come and where are you going? Where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. She never asked where she was, and she never said where she was going. You know why? Because she didn't know. I can tell you where I've come from. I can tell you my story. I can tell you why I'm here. I've been mistreated, and I'm fleeing. Where are you going? I don't know. I'm just getting out of there. So the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants so that they will be too many to count. And so now God is going to work in the story. What is the angel here saying? I know your story. I know your issue. This has not gone the way that we wanted it to go. It's not gone the way you wanted it to go, but I am in control. I am the great I am. I am all powerful. I am all knowing. I can do anything. And so these decisions have been made. These were not the right way to go, but in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of this Netflix original story, I am in control. Hagar, don't worry. I want you to go back. I want you to go back and trust me. And if you'll trust me, that child inside of you will also be the father of many nations, too many to even count. Verse 11, the angel of the Lord said to her further, behold, you are pregnant, and you will give birth to a son, and you shall name him Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. The word Ishmael is the Lord hears. I want you to remember that. The Lord hears. Hears the cries, hears the stories. The Lord hears. Verse 12, but he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he will live in defiance of all of his brothers. Now, what the angel here is telling her is like he's going to be a nomad. He's going to continue moving. This is who you're giving birth to. He's going to roam. He's going to have many, many kids. His ancestors are going to be big and huge, like the stars of the sand. It's the same type of thing that has been told to Abram and Sarai, because this is still Abram's son. Verse 13. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are a God who sees me. For she said, have I seen him here and lived after he saw me? Here's Sarah. Here's Hagar. She has fled. She's left Sarai, who was treating her poorly. And now her story is developing. Her personal story is developing. Who is she? She was a nothing slave with no rights, no money. She was a nothing slave living in the home of Abram and Sarai. And she now sleeps with the man. She sleeps with the guy who's in charge of everything because they want her to have his child. And then it goes crazy. And then jealousy comes in, hatred comes in. And now where does she find herself? She finds herself, before she was at least a slave with a place to work and a place to eat and live. Now she's all by herself. She's just roaming out. Hagar, where are you going? I don't know. I just got to get me and my pregnant self out of that home. I don't know where I'm going. And as she sits there, the angel of the Lord comes. And it is in this presence that she knows God is there, and he meets her right where she is. And she names him. And you should know this little fun fact. The only person from Genesis to Revelation in the whole Bible, the only person recorded that gives God a name based on how God has interacted with them is a female slave. That's crazy. Only in the whole Bible. You are El Roi. You are the God who sees me. El is just a generic name in Hebrew for God. Roi is the shepherd sees. You're the God who sees me. Again, El Roi, she puts it in there, is the idea of a shepherd who's close to his sheep. A shepherd who is watching everything that happens to the sheep. He's close, he guides, he loves, he protects. He's right there really close. You're the God who sees me. You see the foreshadowing of the great shepherd? Jesus is called the great shepherd. You're the God who's right here. Where's right here? Right here is I'm all by myself. Right here is I'm pregnant. I've been abused in a powerful way. I've been kicked out. I don't have food. I don't have water. I don't have shelter. I don't have anything. But God shows up. And she is in such distress that when God shows up, she says, you're the God who sees me in a tender way, just like the shepherd. You're El Roi. But also, if you remember in the story, she says, have I seen him here and lived after he saw me? You see, the God who sees me is also present. Because this angel that we're talking about at first, this is a theophany. This is the presence of God coming and interacting with humans. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, there's someone in the furnace. It's this Jesus. It's this theophany. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Right in her time of need. Right when the story is getting ready to explode. You are the God who sees me, and you are present. And she even knows now she's seen the power of God, which is why she has that phrase. Have I seen the majesty? Have I seen the miraculous God? He's so close, and I didn't die. Remember in the Old Testament, there's times where God said, you can't even look at me. I'm so powerful, you can't even look at me. But not this time, not in this story. Not when the single mom, pregnant, no home, no future. Not when she needs El Roi. Not when she needs the God who sees me and the God who is present. He's right here with me in all of his majesty, in all of his glory, and I didn't even die. This is incredible. This is incredible. I want you to go to this story. I'm not sure if you've ever heard this story, but I want you to put yourself in her story. Hagar, where are you coming from? Mistreatment, I'm running. Where are you going? No answer. What are you going to do in the next hour? I don't know. What are you going to do for food and water and shelter? I don't know. And that's where God meets her. Again, I'm going to say it one more time. It's incredible. In all of the Old Testament, it's a slave girl, only one who ever gives us a name of God. You are El Roi. You see the emotion that's there? You see the sense of being very close and personal? And so now I want to walk you through the story, but also invite you to take a seat next to Hagar, right there by the tree. You see, God sees your personal story. God sees your personal story. He saw Hagar for who she was and the destitute of the situation that she was in. God knows and understands the totality of your story. As you're sitting here right now, or sometimes maybe you've been felt like you were alone, and you need to know, if you're not a Christian, you need to know that your Creator, your God, He knows your story. He knows the totality of your story. Too many of us can go back to when we were kids. We can go back to a frightful event. God knows your story. He knows what happened in your home. He knows what happened once you left home. He knows your personality. He knows your gifts. He knows who your parents are. He knows the good times that you celebrate. He knows those times. He knows your story. He knows the abuses. He knows when you're at your wit's end in your story. He knows your personal story. What is your story? If we put your story up on the screens, what is your story? What brings you here? What has happened to you? What have you done? What have you experienced? You need to know and be comforted that He is El Roi, the God who sees and knows your story. I was reading through this once again this week, and I was reading through it. I was trying to put myself in that situation and my story, and God sees that. And in that moment, God kind of brought to my mind our daughter, Landry Kate, who we've adopted. We adopted at birth. My wife was in the birthing room. We've had her whole life. And we now are making her story, but there's going to come a day where she will realize that she has been adopted. And in that moment, I begin to pray for her then, that in that moment, wherever she is, and whatever is happening, in that moment, she will understand and know that there's a God who sees. There's a God who's present. And when she gets to that age to start asking those questions, she'll know God is El Roi. He sees, He knows my story. I may not know everything that got me here, but God does. And God's been in control of my story ever since I was conceived. God's been in control of my story ever since my birth mom chose life. God's been seeing my story. You see, wherever we are, we have to understand that God knows our story. And He's sympathetic, and He celebrates. What is your story? We should also know that there's things in our story that maybe we don't think anybody knows about. God sees. He sees those things that we want Him to know because they were harmful and tragic. He sees the decisions that we have made. God sees the story. He knows. Sarai and Abram, what are you doing? I told you, put your faith and trust in me. But we're too old. You put your faith and trust in me. And so it was never part of this sense of God's big plan for Sarah, for Abram to have lack of faith. But in the middle of bringing Hagar into the story, now God intervenes. Why? Because He's all powerful, He's all knowing, and God sees. And in that moment, Hagar needed to know God knows, God sees your personal story, but also your present situation. For Hagar, it's nothing. I have nothing. I am nothing. I don't know where to go. It's a perspective thing. And then God comes in, El Roi, and He begins like a tender shepherd in her situation to comfort her, to begin to tell her what she's going to need to do. How is He going to work through this? And then He breathes into her new life. I see the son you have. You're going to name him Ishmael. God hears. I mean, this is an incredible story. If you don't get anything else out of this, we serve and we know a God that in your greatest time of need, God hears, God sees, and He's present. He is personal, and He knows who you are. The Lord helps to change our perspective of reality. God knows your situation. He knows that if you follow Him, He knows that He can guide and He will lead you. We just have to listen and have confidence that what we think is maybe complete chaos and tragedy is actually still God is in control. We always have to have a positive, God-informed perspective. I told you about Landry Kate, our adopted daughter. She's now 5. We were home by ourselves, and she came screaming like bloody murder. Screaming, crying, holding her mouth. Ah! I thought maybe she had fallen and hit her mouth. I didn't see any blood. But she was just freaking out, screaming and crying, holding her mouth. I'm trying to get her to figure out what it is. And then she finally tells me what this whole thing's about is that she discovers she has, as she said, a wobbly tooth. Now, I haven't raised a daughter. I've raised 2 boys, and I've raised them to be tough. I've raised them not to cry at silly things. And so in that moment, I'm thinking, do I become a girl dad right here? Do I just give her a big hug? Oh. No. I changed the perspective. I said, you have a wobbly tooth? You have a wobbly tooth? Oh, she's freaking out. I said, you have a wobbly tooth? That's awesome. She kind of looked. I was like, listen, that just means that soon it's going to fall out and you're going to get money. I mean, this is a money deal. She stopped crying just a little bit. I was like, yeah. It's going to fall out. And then some of you don't do this with your kids. We've done it with our kids. They're Christian. They're good. The tooth fairy is going to come. And you're going to stick that tooth under your pillow. And back in my day, we got a quarter, so I thought I'd up it a little bit. I was like, you'll get like $1. She kind of looked like so cheap. And I said, so when that thing falls out, this is good news. It's worth money. Plus, one day, all your teeth are going to fall out. That didn't go over very well. All your teeth are going to fall out. And you're going to get big adult teeth. Oh, okay, okay. And then I had to go back to the money thing to stay on the perspective. And soon, the crying stopped, and she began to talk about her wonderful wobbly tooth and how great the wobbly tooth was and how this was going to be awesome. And she can't wait till it falls out and put it under her pillow. Of course, I have a picture for when it actually happened. There you go. She lost her tooth. And she put it under her pillow. And after she fell asleep, I saw my wife get a $10 bill. That's a story for another day. Preferred solution. God sees your preferred solution. And the preferred solution is your present situation. Present situation. He sees your present situation, and the present situation is He's in control, and God moves to change your perspective. How did He change Hagar's perspective? I know that you're pregnant. You're going to go back, and that baby inside of you is going to grow and become the father of many nations. Stars you can't even, kids like the stars you can't even count. He changed her perspective in her situation. How does God do that? Because He's right there close like the good shepherd. He sees and He is present. But not only does God see your personal story all the way back, He's seen everything that's ever happened to you. He knows how you got where you are, maybe some poor decisions you've made. He sees your personal story. He absolutely knows the immediate present situation. And of course, He has the preferred solution. And this is an incredible part. Hagar, where are you going? I don't know. Well, here's what you need to do. And some of us don't like this either. Go submit. Go back and submit. I want you, Hagar, to do what Abram and Sarai chose not to do. I want you to put your faith in me. I'm sitting right here with you. I want you to go back and submit to Sarai. She's in control. This is where you're going to live. This is a good deal for you. You have a child of Abram's. He's the man. He's the big landowner. He's the big poopah. He's everything, right? Go get in that home. It's going to be tough. But I want you to go back. And I want you to fall under her authority and be everything that you can be there. And I want you to trust me. I want you to live by faith. That which Sarai and Abram were not doing. Go back and live by faith. You see, God has our preferred solution, and we must understand this. If we're following Him, it's not about you. It's about Him. He's working for His glory in our life, not yours. But God, I'd rather have you do it this way. Sure, we'd all wish God would just be our little genie in the bottle. But that's not how it works. God's like, you trust me. You stay in the process. I am in ultimate control, working for your good. Why? Because God is good. God is able. And we are to trust and obey. Trust and obey. Sang this song when I was growing up, little hymnals in the Baptist church. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. I haven't seen those in a lot of our newer songs. Trust and obey. That's what He tells Hagar. I have a preferred solution for you, but you're going to have to obey. You're going to have to do what I ask you to do and put your faith in me. I have a plan for your life, and it's going to go up and down, not always going to be what you like, but I am here for you. If you want to read and fast forward to the story later on, when Ishmael's 13, her and Sarah are butting heads again, and they kick her out again. It's crazy. And while her and her son are out in the desert, and she actually gets far enough away from Ishmael because she doesn't want to watch him die, guess who shows up? God shows up again. Says, I got it. You head that way. The boy will be just fine. And he does become a father of many nations. And the story continues. A preferred solution. Listen, I told you that part of it there. You have to go read it for yourself because it sounds really good here, but then when he's 13, it gets chaotic again. You know why? Because that's how life is. Life is chaotic. It gets crazy. But God has our preferred solution in his mind. But it's about our perspective. Remember talking about the sight? She saw Sarah as insignificant in her sight. Get rid of that slave girl. I have become insignificant, despised in her sight. Why sight? Because whatever we're focused on is the direction that we will go. So let me ask you a question. What is it that you see? What do you see? When it comes to God's plan for your life, when God's looking at your story, when you know God's observing your situation and setting you on a preferred solution, who do you see? Who do you see? Our focus, what we see, is the direction. I'll give you an example. Some of you guys like to go bike riding. I like to go bike riding. And when you go bike riding through different trails and city parks, and you're riding on the path, and everybody's riding, and then you'll come to a place where many times there's a gate. We have a picture of it right here. You're riding, and all of a sudden there's this sense of a pole right there in the fence. And as I'm riding up to the fence with the pole in the middle, I've been riding over here carefree. It's just riding my bike, right? Because in the open range, I'm focused on the trail. But when I get closer, when so many people get closer to the fence and they're riding their bike, they begin to focus on the fence post and on this post, and they start doing this. I have seen people get off their bike and walk it through because probably before their handlebar has hit it and they've wrecked. Or they get too nervous. Anxiety goes up. Fear goes up because they're looking at the poles. They're looking at the poles. The path never changed. The size never changed. What changed? What you're focused on. What changed? What you're focused on. The ability to ride the bike on the path did not change. Whatever you focus on is the direction that you will go. And so when you and I begin to focus on a God who knows my story, he knows my situation, he has a preferred solution for me to go in, you focus on God and you move and you keep moving. What do you see? Hagar was sitting there with nothing. And she said, you are the God who sees me. And I'm seeing you. You see, through the power of God, he sees you. He knows your story. He knows everything about you. He has the ability to move you forward. But who do you see? Do you see God right there next to you? As the good shepherd, that he's El Roy, the shepherd who sees, who's tender, who takes care of me, who knows how to guide and lead me. That's the God you need to see. And so when you begin to see God in all circumstances, things change. And it doesn't matter in the sense of your preferred solution, your preferred future, how you got to where you are. What matters now is, how are you trusting the God who sees you? How are you trusting the God who now has the solution for you? And are you willing to sit and listen? And that's what I want to challenge us before we leave. Some of us just need to go and sit and listen. And just rest. Maybe today, just need to go for a walk. Go out in the backyard. Go in the corner of your house. And just sit there, and I want you to contemplate this. That's why I made it easy to remember. God knows your story, how you got there. He knows your situation. And you may not know what the future holds specifically, which is true about all of us, but God does. Just sit there and understand that he's the God who sees, and to begin to see him for who he is. He is all-knowing, all-powerful. He is good. He's in control. Nothing catches him off guard. Nothing catches him where God's like, I can't believe that happened. Do we have free choice? Absolutely. We choose. Sarai and Abram chose poorly. And in the middle of a poor choice, God intervened, because that which many times the devil means for evil, God can use for good. But God can only use it for good in your story if you'll sit and know that he sees you, he's present, and then you focus on who you see. Say it one more time. What you focus on is what you gravitate to. What you focus on is where you end up going. You don't have to hit the pole. You don't have to be a chicken and walk your bike through it. Ride fast. Ride strong. Ride with confidence. And just focus on the path. God, we thank you that you are here, that you are with us. What an incredible story. God, a single mom who's been verbally abused, kicked out on her own. And God, you met her right where she was. You are the God who sees and is present. Help us to focus on that. We ask it in your name.